For adults, the heart automatically adjusts to low blood volumes as the patient loses blood. So down and dirty and quick to go over this. If the patient is losing blood, they go into compensated shock. Compensated shock would then indicate a patient having an increased heart rate and increased respiration, so tachycardia, tachypnea. This is compensated shock without any true blood pressure changes. As it's going into decompensated shock, we're going to start noticing that the blood pressure is going to start dropping, the heart rate's going to start going back down, and you're going to think it's normalizing when it's not. We're actually in decompensated shock, and everything starts deteriorating, going into irreversible, then the patient dies. Right? Kind of the quick breakdown of how shock works between compensated versus irreversible. Right? We need to catch that in compensated shock. Here's where you guys, as advanced EMTs with the more higher knowledge of pharmacology, if you have a patient on beta blockers like metoprolol, metoprolol is a beta blocker controlling heart rate, right? So a patient, like an elderly person taking beta blockers, all right, were to have a traumatic injury and is bleeding internally, it may mask tachycardia. Okay, so look at the medication history. Right? The blood is unevenly distributed throughout the body for function of blood. Approximately 30% of the blood is found within the heart, arteries, and capillaries. So 70% of the blood is usually found within the veins and the venules. So the interstitial space between the cells and the two main forces that work inside the capillary is hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure, it's called. Hydrostatic pressure is greatly diminished by the time the fluid reaches the venous side of the capillary, so coagulation or clotting occurs as a result of a complex chemical process that creates a small fiber near the injured blood vessel, trapping red blood cells. So the lymphatic system, I look at this as the dirty system, right? Is a thin plasma-like fluid formed from interstitial fluid or ECF. The sulfur materials are then filtered from the lymph or the lymph nodes and returns to the main circulatory system via the thoracic duct. So this is kind of like your waste system. And it's always indicated in green on your pictures. So it carries away fluid from the tissues, present in all tissues except central nervous system, bone marrow, cartilage, epidermis, or the carina. Okay, so 15 minutes left. Hopefully we can get through the rest of these slides here. I apologize if we go a little bit over. That's why we didn't break, because we would have been here till like 11 o'clock. So the nervous system, AEMT, most complex organ system within the human body, is composed of the brain, spinal cord, and thousands of nerves, right? Divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, the central being the central part from the brain down the spinal cord, peripheral being the extremities, right? This helps with voluntary movement, walking, talking. The autonomic nervous system, we have parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system as well. And they help control. We'll get to that here in a second. There are three. Oh, I don't want to do that though. There are three major subdivisions of the brain, and they are the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. All right. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, called the gray matter. Right. So it composed of four lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. And as you can see on the photo here, right? The occipital lobe controls vision. Temporal is hearing and reading. Parietal lobe, body awareness, language, taste, things like that. And then the frontal lobe is conscious thought, speech, smell, and primary motor area. So if you have a patient with head trauma, right, and they have slurred speech, things are just garbled, they don't understand what's going on there as far as language goes, it could be a parietal temporal in that region, or there could be a stroke or any kind of bleed. If they have blurry vision, probably an occipital damage, right? If they have a hard time with speech, if they can't smell, it could be something in the frontal lobe. To have an idea of where these things are located. The cerebellum, called the athlete's brain, it coordinates the various activities of the body, particularly body movements. The brainstem, most primitive part of the central nervous system, lies deep within the cranium, best protected by the CNS. Right? So compromised in three areas: the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Reticular activating system, or what they call the name would be the RAS, is in the midbrain, which keeps you conscious. The spinal cord, extension of the brainstem, contains nerve cells. Nerve fibers transmit information to and from the brain itself. The principal function is to transmit messages between the brain and the body. The meninges, all right, the entire CNS is enclosed by a set of three tough membranes known as the meninges, right? So the dura mater, arachnoid, and the pia mater, which is the innermost layer. So the dura mater being the toughest outer membrane, the arachnoid being the second layer, innermost being the pia. Right, the float of the cerebral spinal fluid, which is manufactured by the cells in the choroidal plexus in the ventricles itself. Right, your CSF lies in that arachnoid area. Right, that's where the CSF is located. Area normally interconnected with CSF floats freely within the subarachnoid space. Right, so if we have a patient who is leaking CSF, we get that halo effect as well. Looking for that from the ears, nose, right? That means that they have a leak from the subarachnoid space, right? Perfect. Let's keep going with this here. The diencephalon, which is located between the brainstem and the cerebrum, includes the thalamus, the subthalamus, and the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. The thalamus processes the most sensory input and influences mood and general body movements. The hypothalamus is vital in the control of many body functions. All right, so we talk about the brainstem stuff here. The limbic system, also called the emotional brain, influences emotions, motivation, mood, and sensations of pain and pleasure. So right now, you guys are influencing pain because you're dealing with this lecture right now. All right, we're getting there. We're close to the end. All right. So comprised of the peripheral nervous system, composed of cables of nerve fibers, right, which divide into two portions. Somatic nervous system transmits signals from the brain to the voluntary muscles. The autonomic is a sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? Which we'll go more in detail when we start talking about neurological emergencies. But sympathetic is your fight or flight. If I walk up the mic right now and I smack him across the face, he's either going to fight me or he's going to run the other direction, right? He's like, I'm going to take you on. That's what he's saying right now, right? The parasympathetic system slows the body down, right? What used to be called the feed or breathe, right? When you're sleeping. Okay. Each one of these has something called neurotransmitters and hormones, right? So the sympathetic nervous system will have something called norepinephrine. You guys have heard of that before, right? The medication that paramedics administer called Levophed is norepinephrine. It's a neurotransmitter. And the other part of that is a hormone called epinephrine, medication that you guys administer in cardiac arrest management. Right? And acetylcholine is the parasympathetic neurotransmitter. Right. And like I said, we're going to cover more on that in depth in neurological emergencies. Here's something that you guys should be familiar with, and I would say memorize, is the 12 cranial nerves. Right. I'm not going to go over all these in detail right now. Memorize them, and we'll cover more in neuro. Because when we're doing a neurological assessment, if you use like an NIH score, things like that, we're actually checking a lot of these cranial nerves when we're doing our assessment to find out if they're neurologically intact. Right. And I have apps for that as well that I can show you guys that have pretty cool, they're pretty neat to utilize. Right. So take a review, take a look at the cranial nerves. We'll discuss it in the next class. When we talk about not next class, one of the classes we do neurological. Here are those dermatomes I was telling you about before. So T4 nipple line, T10 umbilical. If you know those two, you should be able to figure out all the rest of them. Right? If you memorize those two, it makes life a lot easier. These are all areas of skin that correspond with spinal nerves. Those are the two most important. So T4, which is right here. So you can see nipple line, and T10, which is here. That's your umbilical, where your umbilical is located. And you kind of go down below and up above from those two to have an idea of where all those are located. So if you memorize those two, you're doing well. Right, the eyeball. The eyeball is called the globe. So the inner surface of the eyelids or exposed surface of the eyes itself, covered by a delicate membrane, the conjunctiva, which keeps moist fluid produced by the lacrimal glands. Right. So the behind the iris are the lenses, and the lenses focus images onto the retina itself. Right. The skin and tegumentary system, which is the largest organ in the human body, serves as the interface between the body and the outside world. It plays a crucial role in maintaining the consistency of internal environment homeostasis. Right. So as you can see, the hairs, the pores, these are your sweat glands coming. These are your sweat glands down here. Oh, I'm drawing on that one here, and they sweat up through the pores. You have the erector pili muscle, which is here, and that muscle will stand that hair erect. So instead of being limp down, it will stand up straight like this. That's what the erector pili muscle is for. These are called sebaceous glands. Your sweat glands, your hair follicle is the follicle down here going up to the hair. Then you look at the blood vessels all down through into the subcutaneous tissue, which is all your fatty tissues down here, right? Important for us to know? Absolutely. When we start talking about first, second, and third or degree burns, right? Or superficial, partial thickness, full thickness burns, right? There's actually 6 different categories of burns as well, but we only talk about the 3 in our level of EMS. Remember that it serves 3 major functions. It protects, it regulates, and it transmits information to the brain. Those are the 3 things that it will do. The major organ for regulation of body temperature. As far as digestive system goes, it consists of the stomach, intestines, mouth, salivary glands, the pharynx, esophagus, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, rectum, and the anus. In digestion, it's all part of the process, right? Of processing the food that nourishes the individual cells of the body. It's labeled in the 4 different quadrants using the umbilical as a landmark. You just draw a line like this, and here's your 4 quadrants. As you can see here, the digestive system, urinary bladder lies just beneath the pubic symphysis. Okay, urinary bladder down here. All right. So as you're palpating on the abdomen, be careful when you push. You also want to make sure you palpate the bladder location. All right. Your duodenum sits here. Your pancreas, your kidneys sit retroperitoneal. So you're going to palpate on the backside and putting pressure to see if there's any retroperitoneal pain. If you have bruising, oh, what the heck has happened here again? If you have any kind of significant bruising around the umbilicus here, okay, it's all bruising, what is that called? What sign is that? You guys remember?
Levine sign.
No, Levine's is for cardiac.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's fine. These are the C, Ullins. Cullen sign is any kind of pancreatic injury. Will cause significant bruising around the umbilicus, which would be called Cullen sign. Right? If you have kidney damage, spleen as well, you have significant bruising on the flank on each side, and that is called what? Gray Turner sign. I expect you guys to know these. Cullen sign, bruising around the umbilicus. Gray Turner sign, bruising on the flank. Murphy's sign is for the appendix, also known as McBurney's point. Okay. So just memorize a lot of these. We'll go over more as we go into it. But remember, the kidney is located retroperitoneal in the retroperitoneum cavity. The mouth consists of lips, cheeks, gums, teeth, and tongue, where the mucous membrane lines the mouth. Okay. The oropharynx extends vertically from the back of the mouth to the esophagus and the trachea, and the esophagus extends from the end of the pharynx into the stomach. Sorry, I'm trying to go through this a little bit faster towards the end to get you guys to the end of this. All right, so the stomach converts ingest food to chyme, located in the left upper quadrant, the abdominal cavity, largely protected by the lower ribs. The pancreas is a solid flat organ behind the liver and stomach behind the peritoneum. This contains two glands, exocrine and endocrine glands, which secrete in pancreatic juices containing enzymes that aid in the digestion of fats, starches, and proteins, or the endocrine glands are where the islets of Langerhans, where insulin is produced. Okay, so the endocrine glands are important to know because that's what helps regulate our sugar. The liver, large, located in the right upper quadrant, also extends to the left upper quadrant, where poisonous substances produced by digestion are rendered harmless. So form factors necessary for blood clotting, production of normal plasma, connects the intestines by the bile ducts. Gallbladder then serves as reservoir for concentrating organ for bile produced in the liver. The liver is very important to us because that is where things are metabolized, including medications. It's something called the first pass effect. We'll get that in pharmacology. As far as the small intestines go, this might last about 10 more minutes. I apologize. So the composed of the duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum, or the small intestines, produce enzymes and mucus to aid in digestion. So large intestines consist of the cecum, the colon, and the rectum, which absorbs final 5 to 10% of digested food and water in a form of a solid stool. Now, if you have an overosmotic colon, that's when diarrhea starts kicking in. The appendix, which is a 3 to 4 inch tube long that opens into the cecum in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. To locate the appendix is what they call McBurney's point, right? We may have Murphy's sign as well, where you're going to have, you measure from the corner of the pelvis 3 inches down or 5 inches up from the I had it backwards. It's 5 inches down from the umbilicus, 3 inches up from the corner of the pelvis. And the right side is McBurney's point. And at that point there is where the appendix is. You're going to put pressure on, looking to rebound tenderness as well. Let's see if they have appendicitis. The rectum is a large hollow organ that stores quantities of feces until expelled. All right. Let's see. As far as different secretions, primarily enzymes are added to food by salivary glands, stomach, liver, pancreas, and small intestines. This helps convert everything over from basic sugars, fatty acids, or amino acids. Right. So the endocrine system, complex message control system that integrates many body functions made up of various glands throughout the body. Exocrine and endocrine glands, which we already talked about and discussed. Hormones regulated many body functions. So an agonist is a molecule that binds to a cell receptor and triggers a response. An antagonist is a molecule that binds to a cell receptor and blocks that action of the agonist. We will cover that more in pharmacology. All right, this is your endocrine system, AMP, really quick. Pituitary gland, hypothalamus, where we secrete growth hormones, thyroid stimulating hormones, adrenocorticotropin hormones, and also 3 gonadotropic hormones as well. All right. I apologize for going, this is quite a lengthy lecture. We have 10 more slides to go and we are done. So the thyroid gland, large gland at the base of the neck, manufactures and secretes hormones that have a role in growth, development, and metabolism, right? So they'll do something called a TSH check in the hospitals to see if you have increased thyroid. Right? This can cause significant weight gain as well and secretes calcitonin and things like that. So a lot of times they'll do what they call a TSH check to see how it's functioning. The pancreas, organ of the endocrine and digestive system within the islets of Langerhans. Remember, this is where alpha cells that secrete glucagon, beta cells secrete insulin, and delta cells secrete somatostatin. Somatostatin is responsible for the inhibition Hey, I'm back. Oh, what just happened? You guys still hear me?
Can now.
You guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay. That was odd. Connection for a minute there. My phone disconnected. Not on the internet from the area I'm at. All right, we'll finish this up really quick here then. Almost done. All right, you guys can still hear me okay? And hormones are the gonads, reproductive glands, ovaries in women, testes in men, where testosterone is major and by this. All right. Forward here, the urinary system controls the discharge and certain waste materials filtered from the body. But the main function, obviously, is controlling pH balance. Filters eliminate waste and control fluid balance of the body. So that's why the kidneys are so important to help with that filtration, as you can see here. All right. You still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. All right. The lost connection, I can't draw more pictures for you guys, so I apologize. But as you can see here, if you can see here, right? We have our kidneys. It's not even drawing correctly here. Going into the ureter, into the bladder, right? Going down the urethra through the penile opening, right? The urethra coming down through here is a common source of infection for UTIs. So it's something to pick up on as well, right? So you can have bladder infections and kidney infections through there. Females are more prone to UTIs due to the length of the urethra. As far as AEMT, genital system controls reproductive process. Remember, the male genitalia lies outside the pelvic cavity, where the female genitalia are contained within the pelvis, as you can see in this slide here. And we have 3 more slides to go. We'll continue on. Female reproductive system. Again, we'll cover this more in detail when we get into obstetrics. I'm not going to go in detail on this. Ovaries produce sex hormones and oocytes as well. During the menstrual cycle, ovum matures. If fertilization occurs, fertilized egg then proceeds through the fallopian tube to implant in the uterus. One of the most common issues with unexplained abdominal pain in reproductive years in a female could be a ectopic pregnancy located where?
In the fallopian tubes?
Yep, fallopian tubes. Exactly. And to finish up the life support chain, the body cells, tissues, and organs require oxygen, nutrients, removal of waste products to perform their job. This is how we meet homeostasis. Oxygen is brought to the cells through respiratory and circulatory systems. The digestive system takes food and breaks it down into glucose, and the circulatory system is then is a carrier of these supplies and waste through the process of perfusion. Right. So 150 slides broken down into one. This is kind of what we're doing. Stop sharing this really quick. Stop the recording.